Hey there, get ready for a super cool story. Imagine a plane ride that's supposed to be boring and easy. Just sit down, listen to music, and chill until you land. That's what Jamal Carter wanted. He's 32 years old, and he was coming home after a long trip for work. He was so tired. His tie was all loose around his neck, hanging there like it was tired too. All he wanted was to sit in his seat, close his eyes, and take a break. But guess what? This plane ride wasn't going to be boring at all. Nope. It was about to turn into a big, exciting fight, a showdown. And here's the best part, Jamal wasn't the kind of guy everyone thought he was. They thought he was quiet and easy to push around. Oh boy, were they wrong. Picture this in your head, a plane full of people. It's crowded, and everyone's trying to find their seats. Bags are getting stuffed into little cubbies above the seats. Kids are wiggling around, and grown ups are chatting or looking at their phones. It's noisy, but it's just a regular day on a plane, or so they thought. Then there's Jamal. He's wearing a comfy hoodie, holding his boarding pass tight in his hand. That's the little paper that tells you where you're supposed to sit. His seat was 14B, and he was ready to plop down and rest. He'd been working hard, and his eyes were droopy. All he could think about was sitting down and maybe taking a nap. Simple, right? Nope, not today. Now, let's talk about Karen. Karen was the flight attendant on this plane. You know those people who help you on flights? They bring snacks and tell you to buckle your seat belt. Well, Karen wasn't the nice kind of helper. Oh no. She was loud and bossy. She walked up and down the aisle, that's the little walkway between the seats, yelling at people like she was the queen of the sky. Sit down, she'd snap. Put your bag up there, she'd bark. People listened because, well, she was scary. Her voice was sharp, like a teacher who's mad at the whole class. And her face? It looked like she hadn't smiled in 100 years. Yep, Karen was the kind of person who made you want to hide under your seat. Jamal didn't even notice her at first. He was too busy thinking about getting to his seat. He stepped into the aisle, looking at the numbers above the seats. 12A. 12B. 13A. 13B, there it was, 14B. His spot. He smiled a little to himself because he was almost there. He could almost feel the soft seat under him. He was so close to relaxing. But then, out of nowhere, Karen swooped in. She moved fast, like a bird diving for food. Her eyes locked onto Jamal, and you could tell she was already mad about something. What was it? Nobody knew yet, not the other passengers, not Jamal, not even me telling you the story. But something was brewing. Something big. See, flights are supposed to be simple. You get on, you sit, you fly, you land. That's it? That's what Jamal wanted. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't trying to make a fuss. He was just a guy in a hoodie with a boarding pass, ready to go home. He had a normal job, something where he helped people fix computers or set up stuff at an office. He wasn't famous. He wasn't loud. He was just Jamal. But sometimes, even when you're minding your own business, trouble finds you. And that's exactly what was about to happen. Let's set the scene a little more, okay? The plane wasn't fancy. It was one of those regular ones you see all the time. The seats were blue, a little worn out from tons of people sitting in them. The air smelled like coffee and airplane snacks, you know, those tiny pretzels they give you. Outside, through the little round windows, you could see the ground crew in bright orange vests, waving sticks to guide the plane. It was a sunny day, and the sky was big and blue. Everything seemed fine. Normal. Boring, even. But boring was about to fly right out the window. Jamal took another step toward 14B. His sneakers squeaked a tiny bit on the floor. He was almost there, just one more step. He could see the seat waiting for him. It wasn't by the window, but it was close enough that he could peek out if he wanted to. He didn't care about that, though. He just wanted to sit. His legs felt heavy, like they were begging him to rest. His bag was small, just a backpack he could slide under the seat in front of him. Easy. No problems. Or so he thought. Karen was watching him the whole time. Her eyes were narrow, like she was a detective looking for clues. Why was she so grumpy? Maybe she'd had a bad day. Maybe someone spilled juice on her earlier. Or maybe she just didn't like how Jamal looked calm, quiet, not jumping to obey her every word. Whatever it was, she decided right then and there that Jamal was her target. She didn't know him. She didn't know his story. But she was about to make a big mistake. A huge one. The other people on the plane didn't see it coming either. There was a mom in 15C, buckling her little girl into a seat. The girl had pigtails and a teddy bear, and she was giggling about something. A guy across the aisle, maybe in 14D, was scrolling on his phone, not paying attention. An old man near the front was already snoring, his head tipped back like he didn't care about anything. They were all just doing their own thing, waiting for the plane to take off. Nobody knew that this flight was about to turn into a big deal. Nobody knew that Jamal, this quiet guy in a hoodie, was about to surprise them all. So, here's where it starts getting good. Jamal reached 14B. He stopped, ready to sit down. His hand was on the back of the seat, feeling the scratchy fabric. He was so close to resting. He could almost hear his favorite song playing in his earbuds. But then bam, Karen's voice cut through the air like a thunderclap. "Sir," she shouted. Everyone turned to look. The mom with the pigtails kid froze. The phone guy looked up. Even the snoring old man twitched a little. Jamal turned his head, surprised. What was going on? Karen marched right up to him. Her shoes clicked on the floor, click, click, click like a drum roll before something big. She stood there, hands on her hips, glaring at Jamal. "You're in the wrong spot," she said, loud and mean. Her words hit him like a slap. Jamal blinked. Wrong spot. He didn't get it. He pulled out his boarding pass, the little paper he'd been holding so tight, and looked at it. Yep, there it was, 14B. Clear as day. He wasn't wrong. This was his seat. But Karen didn't care about that. She didn't even ask to see his ticket. She just kept staring at him, her face all scrunched up like she'd smelled something bad. "Move," she said, pointing down the aisle like she was sending him to the back of the plane. Jamal didn't move. Not yet. He tilted his head a little, confused. "This is my seat," he said. His voice was soft but strong, like he wasn't scared of her yelling. That made Karen even madder. Her cheeks turned pink, then red. Oh boy, she was about to lose it. Now, let's think about this for a second. Jamal wasn't doing anything wrong. He had his ticket. He found his seat. He was polite. So why was Karen so mad? Was it just bad luck that she picked him to yell at? Or was something else going on? Something sneaky or unfair? You're going to have to keep listening to find out. This story's just getting started, and trust me, it's going to twist and turn in ways you won't expect. The plane was quiet for a second after Karen yelled. Everyone was watching. It was like a movie, and Jamal and Karen were the stars. But who was the good guy? Who was the bad guy? You might think you know already, but hold on, there's more to this than meets the eye. Jamal wasn't just some random guy. And Karen? She was about to learn that the hard way. Let's paint the picture a little more. The seats around Jamal were filling up fast. A lady with a big purse squeezed into 14A, right next to him. She didn't say anything, just stuffed her purse under her seat and stared straight ahead. The guy in 14D, the phone guy, put his phone down for a second and peeked over. He looked curious, like he was waiting for something exciting to happen. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. And it was. A big one. Jamal stood there, still holding his boarding pass. He didn't yell back at Karen. He didn't wave his arms or make a scene. He just looked at her, calm and steady. That's important, he didn't lose his cool. But you could tell he wasn't going to let her boss him around either. He was like a rock in a river, standing strong while the water rushed around him. Karen didn't like that. Not one bit. She took a step closer, her eyes flashing. "I said move," she shouted again. Her voice was so loud it bounced off the walls of the plane. The little girl with pigtails stopped giggling. The mom hugged her teddy bear tighter. The phone guy's eyes got wide. Even the old snoring man opened one eye, like he was finally waking up. This wasn't just a little argument anymore. It was a showdown, and everyone could feel it. But here's the thing, Jamal didn't budge. He didn't sit down, but he didn't walk away either. He just stood there, looking at Karen, his ticket still in his hand. "Ma'am," he said, super polite, "this is my seat. It says 14B right here." He held up the paper so she could see it. Simple. Clear. No arguing, no yelling, just the truth. You'd think that would fix everything, right? Nope. Karen didn't even look at the ticket. She crossed her arms and huffed, like Jamal had just said something rude. What was her deal? Let's zoom out for a minute. The plane was almost ready to go. The doors were closed, and the ground crew outside was waving goodbye. The engines were starting to hum, a low rumble you could feel in your chest. Everyone else was buckled in, ready to fly. Everyone except Jamal and Karen, standing there in the aisle like two cowboys in an old Western movie, facing off before a big fight. Who was going to win? Who was right? And why was this even happening? Jamal wasn't loud or mean. He wasn't waving his ticket in her face or calling her names. He was just trying to sit down. But Karen acted like he'd broken some giant rule. She kept glaring at him, her lips pressed tight together. Maybe she thought he didn't belong in 14B. Maybe she didn't like how he looked in his hoodie, casual, not fancy. Or maybe she just wanted to feel big and important by bossing someone around. Whatever it was, she picked the wrong guy to mess with. And soon, everyone on that plane would know it. So, what do you think? Was this just a mix-up? Bad luck that Jamal got stuck with a grumpy flight attendant? Or was trouble waiting for him the second he stepped on that plane? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Jamal's not the pushover Karen thinks he is, and something big is coming, something that's going to flip this whole flight upside down. Ready? Let's keep going. Okay, here we go. Things are about to heat up. Jamal was so close to sitting down. He took a step toward his seat, 14B, ready to plop down and relax. His sneakers made a little squeak on the floor, and he was holding his boarding pass tight, like it was his golden ticket. He could almost feel the soft seat under him. But then bam, Karen zoomed in fast, like a hawk swooping down from the sky to grab something. She stopped right in front of him, blocking his way. "Sir, you're in the wrong spot," she said, her voice sharp and loud. It wasn't a quiet little whisper, nope, it was so loud that half the plane could hear her. People turned their heads to look. Eyes got big. Mouths dropped open. What was happening? Jamal didn't get it. He frowned, like when you're confused about a math problem at school. He looked down at his ticket, the little paper that says where you sit. He read it carefully. Yep, it said 14B, clear as day. This was his seat. So he looked up at Karen and said, super calm, "This is 14B. It's my seat." His voice was soft but strong, like when you know you're right but you don't want to yell about it. He wasn't mad. He wasn't scared. He just wanted to sit down. Simple, right? Wrong. Karen didn't like that at all. She didn't smile or say, "Oh, let me check." Nope. She rolled her eyes big time, like she was annoyed with the whole world. Then she barked at him, loud and mean, "I don't think so. Move to the back now." Her words were like a dog growling at you, telling you to get out of its yard. She pointed down the aisle, way to the back of the plane, like she was kicking him out of her space. Her finger jabbed the air, and her face looked like she was ready to fight. Whoa. What was her problem? Now, let's freeze the scene for a second. People around them started to notice. A lady sitting in 15C, just one row behind, leaned over to her friend and whispered, "Why is she so mad?" Her voice was quiet, like she didn't want Karen to hear. She had a big purse on her lap, and her eyes were wide, watching everything. Then there was a guy across the aisle, maybe in 14D. He was holding his phone, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He smirked a little sneaky smile, like this was a funny show and he was excited to see what happened next. Other people rustled in their seats, peeking over. A kid with a teddy bear hugged it tight. It was like the whole plane turned into a big audience, waiting for the next part of the story. Jamal didn't move right away. He stayed cool, like a superhero who doesn't get rattled. He held up his ticket again, showing it to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, nice and polite, "it says 14B right here." He wasn't shouting. He wasn't waving his arms. He just held the paper steady, letting her see the truth. You'd think that would fix it, right? Like, oh, my mistake, go ahead and sit. But no way. Karen's face turned red, bright red, like a tomato or a stop sign. She was mad. Really mad. And then she yelled, "Don't argue with me." Her voice boomed through the plane, so loud it made a baby near the front start crying. She pointed at Jamal again, her finger shaking a little, like he'd just done something awful, like he'd robbed the plane or stolen her lunch. But here's the thing, Jamal hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. He didn't call her names or stomp his feet. He was polite but firm. He wasn't going to let her push him around just because she was yelling. He stood there, tall and steady, in his comfy hoodie. His voice was calm, but you could tell he meant what he said. This was his seat, and he wasn't moving unless he had to. That's important. He wasn't backing down, but he wasn't starting a fight either. He was like a tree standing strong in a big wind. Karen, though. She acted like his calm voice was the worst thing ever. Like him being nice was some kind of attack on her. She puffed up her chest, her uniform stretching a little, and glared at him. Her eyes were narrow, like she was trying to scare him away. Something about Jamal being there standing tall, not scared, in that hoodie made her super upset. Was it the way he talked, so smooth and sure? Was it how he didn't jump when she yelled? Or was it something else, something sneaky we don't know yet? You'll find out soon, I promise. Let's look around the plane a bit more. The seats were blue and a little scratchy, like an old couch. The air smelled like coffee and those tiny pretzels they give you on flights. Outside the little round windows, the sun was shining bright, making everything look happy. But inside? Oh, it was not happy. The lady in 15C kept whispering to her friend. "She's being mean," she said softly, shaking her head. The guy with the smirk leaned back, crossing his arms like he was ready for popcorn. A little girl with pigtails peeked over her seat, her teddy bear squished against her face. "Mommy, why is she yelling?" she asked. Her mom shushed her, but you could tell she was wondering the same thing. Jamal didn't say anything else yet. He just stood there, holding his ticket, looking at Karen. His face wasn't mad or scared, it was calm, like a lake with no waves. That made Karen even madder. She stepped closer, her shoes clicking on the floor, click, 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 like a clock counting down to something big. "I told you to move," she snapped again. Her voice was so loud it bounced off the walls. People flinched. The baby cried louder. The old man near the front, who'd been snoring, finally opened both eyes and grumbled, "What's all this noise?" But Jamal? He didn't flinch. Not even a little. He looked at Karen, steady and strong, and said again, "This is my seat." Still polite. Still calm. He wasn't shouting back. He wasn't being mean. He was just telling the truth. His ticket said 14B, and he was standing right by 14B. Easy, right? Nope. Karen didn't even look at his ticket. Not once. She didn't check it or ask to see it closer. She just kept yelling, like his words didn't matter at all. Why wouldn't she look? Was she scared of being wrong? Or was something else going on? Let's think about this. Jamal was just a regular guy. He had a job, a hoodie, a backpack. He wasn't famous or loud or trying to make trouble. He was tired from work and wanted to sit down. That's it. But Karen acted like he was the biggest problem in the world. She kept pointing at him, her finger wagging like a teacher scolding a kid. "Move to the back," she said again, like she was in charge of everything. But why? Why was she so sure he was wrong? Why wouldn't she just look at his ticket and fix it? The plane got quieter for a second. Everyone was watching, waiting. The air felt thick, like before a thunderstorm. Something big was building up, you could feel it. The lady in 15C clutched her purse tighter. The smirking guy's smile got bigger, like he knew a secret. The little girl with pigtails hid behind her teddy bear, peeking out with one eye. Even the air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. What was going to happen next? Was Jamal going to move? Was Karen going to win? Or was something else about to shake things up? Jamal didn't back down. He didn't sit yet, but he didn't walk away either. He stood there, tall and still, like a statue. His hoodie was a little wrinkled, but he looked strong in it, not weak or scared. Karen kept staring at him, her face getting redder and redder. She didn't like that he wasn't jumping to obey her. Most people would have moved by now, right? If someone yells at you loud enough, you might just go along with it to keep things quiet. But not Jamal. He wasn't loud, but he wasn't a pushover either. That's the key, he was calm, but he had a backbone. Karen huffed, blowing air out of her nose like an angry bull. "I'm not going to tell you again," she shouted. Her voice was so loud it made the windows rattle a tiny bit, or at least it felt like it. The baby's cries turned into a wail. The old man grumbled again, "Can't a guy sleep around here?" The smirking guy chuckled softly, like this was the best thing he'd seen all day. The tension was growing, like a rubber band stretching tighter and tighter. Something had to snap soon. But here's what's cool, Jamal didn't snap. He didn't yell back or stomp his foot. He just looked at her, holding his ticket, and said one more time, "Ma'am, this is my seat." His voice was like a cool breeze, steady and smooth. He wasn't fighting her with shouts. He was fighting her with facts. His ticket said 14B. He was in 14B. That's all there was to it. But Karen wouldn't listen. She wouldn't look. She just kept acting like he was wrong, wrong, wrong. Why was she so mad? Was it because Jamal didn't look scared? Was it his hoodie, casual and comfy, not fancy like some people on the plane? Was it how he stood there, tall and sure, not backing down? Or was there something else, something we don't know yet? Maybe Karen had a bad day. Maybe someone yelled at her earlier, and now she was taking it out on Jamal. Or maybe, just maybe, she didn't like him for a reason she wouldn't say out loud. What do you think? There's more to this, and it's coming soon. The plane was buzzing now, not with noise, but with energy. Everyone could feel it. The lady in 15C shook her head, muttering, "She's crazy." The smirking guy leaned forward a little, like he didn't want to miss a thing. The little girl whispered to her mom, "Is he in trouble?" Her mom didn't answer, just patted her head. The old man closed his eyes again, like he was done with it all. But nobody could look away for long. This was too big, too wild. Jamal stood his ground. He didn't move an inch. His ticket was still in his hand, and his eyes were locked on Karen. He wasn't mad, at least, he didn't look it. He was just there. Strong. Steady. Karen, though. She was a storm, loud, wild, and ready to blow everything over. She took another step closer, so close Jamal could probably smell her coffee breath. "You're holding up this flight," she yelled, like it was all his fault. But was it? He just wanted to sit down. The tension stretched even tighter. You could almost hear it, like a string about to break. People held their breath. The baby stopped crying for a second, like it knew something was up. The smirking guy's smile faded a little. He was hooked now. The lady in 15C gripped her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. Something was going to happen. Something big. But what? Was Karen going to win? Was Jamal going to give up? Or was there a twist coming that nobody saw yet? Stick around, this is just the start of the fight. Jamal's not loud, but he's not weak either. And Karen? She's about to find out she picked the wrong guy to yell at. What's next? Oh, it's going to be good. You'll see soon. All right, let's keep this wild ride going. Jamal was still standing there, right by seat 14B, holding his ticket like it was his shield. Karen was in front of him, her face all red and puffed up like a balloon about to pop. She just yelled at him super loud, telling him he was in the wrong spot and needed to move to the back of the plane. But Jamal? He didn't budge. Not one bit. He was calm, like a superhero who knows he's got the power but doesn't need to show off yet. His voice was soft but strong when he said, "This is 14B. It's my seat." He wasn't yelling or being mean, he was just telling the truth. His ticket said 14B, and there he was, standing by 14B. Easy, right? Nope, not with Karen around. Karen wasn't happy. Oh no, she was mad, really, really mad. When Jamal said that, her eyes got all squinted, like she was trying to shoot lasers at him. She rolled them again, big and dramatic, like she couldn't believe he was talking back to her. "I don't think so," she barked, her voice sharp like a dog snapping at your heels. Move to the back now. She pointed down the aisle again, her arm stiff and her finger wagging like she was shooing away a pesky fly. She didn't even look at his ticket, not once. She just kept yelling, like she was the boss of everything and Jamal had to do what she said, no questions asked. The plane was buzzing with whispers now. People couldn't help it, they were hooked. The lady in 15C, just one row back, leaned over to her friend again. "Why's she so mad?" she muttered, her voice soft so Karen wouldn't hear. She had a big purse on her lap, and her fingers were tapping on it, like she was nervous. Across the aisle, in 14D, a guy with a phone smirked like a sneaky little grin. He'd been scrolling on his screen, but now he was watching, his eyes bright like this was a fun game. A little girl with pigtails a few rows back hugged her teddy bear tight and peeked over the seat. "Mommy, what's happening?" she whispered. Her mom shushed her, but you could tell she was curious too. Everyone was watching, nobody could look away. Jamal didn't let Karen's yelling scare him. He stayed super cool, like ice that doesn't melt even when it's hot outside. He held up his ticket again, showing it to her. "Ma'am," he said, polite as can be, "it says 14B right here." His voice was steady, not shaky or loud. He wasn't trying to start a fight, he was just pointing out the facts. The ticket was right there in his hand, clear as day, 14B. He wasn't making it up. But Karen? She didn't care. She didn't even glance at the paper. Her face turned even redder like a cherry or a fire truck and she shouted, "Don't argue with me." Her voice was so loud it made the air shake. She pointed at him again, her finger jabbing like she thought he'd just done something terrible, like he'd stolen her favorite snack or something. Here's the big thing, Jamal wasn't being rude. He wasn't yelling back or waving his arms. He was polite, but he wasn't backing down either. He stood tall, his hoodie a little wrinkled but comfy, and he looked at her like he wasn't afraid. That's super important, he wasn't loud or mean, but he wasn't going to let her push him around. Karen, though. She acted like his calm voice was the worst thing ever. Like him being nice was some kind of trick to make her mad. She puffed up, her uniform stretching tight, and glared at him with eyes that could have burned a hole in the wall. Something about Jamal standing there, strong and sure, set her off big time. Was it how he talked? Was it his hoodie? Or was there something else going on? Hang on, you'll find out soon. Let's look around some more. The plane was full of people now, all buckled in and ready to fly except for Jamal and Karen, stuck in this showdown. The seats were blue and a little worn out, like an old pair of jeans. The air smelled like coffee and those tiny airplane pretzels, yum, but not enough to calm this mess down. Outside the little windows, the sun was shining bright, making the ground sparkle. It looked peaceful out there, but inside, oh boy, it was anything but peaceful. The lady in 15C kept whispering, "She's being so mean." The smirking guy chuckled softly, like he was watching a funny movie. The little girl with pigtails hid her face in her teddy bear, then peeked out again, too curious to stay hidden. Karen wasn't done yet. She stepped closer to Jamal, super close, like she wanted to scare him away. Her shoes went click, click, click on the floor, loud and fast. "I told you to move," she snapped again. Her voice was like thunder, booming through the plane. A baby near the front started crying loud wails that made everyone jump. The old man who'd been snoring grumbled, "What's all this racket?" and rubbed his eyes. The tension was growing, like when you stretch a rubber band farther and farther. It felt like something was going to snap, and soon. But Jamal? He didn't snap. He didn't yell or stomp or cry. He just stood there, looking at Karen, his ticket still in his hand. "This is my seat," he said again, calm and clear. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't being rude. He was just telling the truth over and over. His ticket said 14B, and he was right by 14B. Why wouldn't Karen listen? Why wouldn't she look at the paper? It was right there. But she didn't. She crossed her arms and huffed, blowing air out of her nose like a dragon. "You're holding up this flight," she yelled, like it was all Jamal's fault. But was it? He just wanted to sit down. The plane got quiet for a tiny second, just a heartbeat. Everyone was waiting. The air felt heavy, like a big storm was coming. The lady in 15C clutched her purse so tight her fingers turned white. The smirking guy's grin got bigger, he was loving this. The little girl whispered again, "Is he in trouble, Mommy. Her mom didn't answer, just stared. The old man shook his head and closed his eyes again, like he was too tired for this. But nobody could really ignore it. This was too big. Jamal didn't move. He stood there, steady as a rock. His hoodie made him look cozy, but he wasn't weak, not at all. Karen kept glaring, her face so red it looked like it might burst. She didn't like that he wasn't scared. Most people would have moved by now, right? If someone yells loud enough, you might just go along to keep things quiet. But not Jamal. He wasn't loud, but he wasn't a pushover either. That's the cool part, he was calm, but he had guts. Karen stomped her foot a little like a kid who's mad she didn't get her way. I'm not telling you again, she shouted. Her voice was so loud it made the baby cry even harder. The old man grumbled louder, can't hear myself think. The smirking guy laughed under his breath, like this was the best show ever. The tension was so thick you could feel it like a big, tight knot in your stomach. Something had to give. But Jamal stayed chill. He didn't yell back or get mad. He just looked at her and said, one more time, ma'am, this is my seat. His voice was like a cool drink of water, smooth and steady. He wasn't fighting with shouts, he was fighting with facts. His ticket said 14B. He was in 14B. That's it. But Karen wouldn't look at it. She wouldn't check. She just kept acting like he was wrong, like he didn't belong there. Why was she so upset? Was it because Jamal didn't jump when she yelled? Was it his hoodie, all casual and not fancy? Was it how he stood there, tall and sure, not shaking? Or was there something else, something sneaky or mean? Maybe she'd had a bad day. Maybe someone spilled juice on her uniform earlier, and she was grumpy. Or maybe, just maybe, she didn't like Jamal for a reason she wouldn't say. What do you think? There's more coming, and it's going to get wild. The plane was alive with energy now. The lady in 15C shook her head, muttering, she's nuts. The smirking guy leaned forward, eyes sparkling. The little girl peeked out again, her teddy bear squished tight. The baby's cries filled the air, and the old man kept grumbling. Everyone could feel it, something big was about to happen. The engines hummed outside, ready to go, but inside, this fight was just getting started. Jamal didn't back down. He didn't sit yet, but he didn't walk away either. He stood there, strong and still, his ticket in his hand. Karen was a storm, loud and wild, but Jamal was a mountain, not moving no matter how hard she blew. She stepped even closer, her breath probably hot on his face. Move it, she yelled again. The plane shook with her voice, or maybe that was just how it felt. The tension was huge now, like a balloon stretched so tight it could pop any second. What was next? Was Karen going to win? Was Jamal going to give up? Or was something bigger coming, something nobody expected? Stick with me, this is just the build-up, and the best part's still ahead. You'll see soon. Okay, here's where things start getting really exciting. Karen was super mad, like a volcano ready to blow. She stormed off down the aisle, her shoes going click, click, click on the floor, fast and loud. She was muttering under her breath, saying stuff nobody could hear clearly, but you could tell it wasn't nice. Her face was all scrunched up, like she'd just bitten into a sour lemon. Jamal. He didn't care. He wasn't going to let her boss him around, not today. So, guess what he did? He sat down in 14B anyway. Yep, he plopped right into that seat, his hoodie bunching up a little as he settled in. He wasn't scared. He wasn't moving. This was his seat, and he was staying put. The plane was buzzing with people watching. They couldn't believe it. Jamal just sat there, cool as a cucumber, like when you're eating a popsicle on a hot day and you don't even care about the heat. Karen had told him to move, but he didn't. He wasn't loud or rude about it, he just sat down, like it was no big deal. His boarding pass, the little paper that said 14B, was still in his hand, wrinkled from holding it so tight. He tucked it into his pocket and leaned back a little, like he was ready to relax. But oh boy, this story wasn't over, not even close. About a minute later, maybe less, Karen came marching back. Her face was redder than ever, like a big, shiny apple. She wasn't alone this time, though. She was dropping the captain's name like it was a secret weapon. I've told the captain about you, she hissed at Jamal, her voice low and mean, like a snake sneaking through the grass. She leaned in close, pointing at him again. "You're lucky we don't kick you off," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Her eyes were all narrow and angry, like she thought she'd won this fight already. She stood there, hands on her hips, waiting for Jamal to jump up and beg for forgiveness or something. But guess what? He didn't. Jamal didn't even flinch. Not a tiny bit. He didn't jump or shake or look scared. He just sat there, calm and steady, like a rock in a river that doesn't move no matter how fast the water flows. He reached into his pocket, not fast, just nice and easy, and pulled out his phone. It was a regular phone, nothing fancy, with a little scratch on the screen. He tapped a few buttons, tap, 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 and then looked up at Karen. "Go ahead and check with him," he said, super quiet but super sure. His voice wasn't loud or shaky, it was smooth, like when you tell your friend a secret and you know it's a good one. What did he mean? Check with who? The captain? This was getting interesting. Karen smirked like a sneaky little smile that said, "I've got you now." She thought she'd won for sure. She turned around, her uniform swishing, and marched back to the front of the plane, all proud and puffed up. She was so sure the captain would back her up. She probably thought Jamal was in big trouble, like he'd get dragged off the plane or something. The other passengers were hooked now. They couldn't look away. Some were annoyed, muttering stuff like, "Why is she making such a fuss?" Others were curious, leaning forward in their seats to see what would happen next. A little kid in 16A2 rows back tugged on his mom's sleeve. "Is that guy in trouble?" he whispered, his voice all high and worried. His mom shushed him, but her eyes were glued to Jamal too. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. But here's where it gets really good. While Karen was gone, stomping up to the front, Jamal didn't look worried at all. Not one bit. He didn't bite his nails or wiggle in his seat or sweat like you do when you're nervous. Nope. He leaned back in 14B, all relaxed, and crossed his arms over his chest like when you're chilling on the couch watching TV. His hoodie was comfy, his face was calm, and his eyes were steady. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He was just waiting. Waiting for what? What did he know that Karen didn't? Why wasn't he freaking out? Oh, you're going to love this, hang on tight, because this plane's about to take off in more ways than one. Let's paint the picture a little more. The plane was full of people now, all buckled in and ready to fly. The seats were blue and a little scratchy, like an old blanket that's still cozy. The air smelled like coffee and those tiny pretzels they give you, crunchy and salty. Outside the little round windows, the sun was shining bright, making the ground look all sparkly. The engines were humming vroom, vroom like a big purr, getting ready to go. Everything seemed normal, except for this big fight brewing right in the middle of the aisle. Karen was gone for now, up at the front, probably tattling to the captain. And Jamal? He was just sitting there, cool and collected. The other passengers couldn't stop watching. The lady in 15C, the one with the big purse, kept whispering to her friend. "She's so bossy," she said, shaking her head. Her friend nodded, eyes wide. The guy in 14D, the smirky one, put his phone down completely now. He was all in, watching like this was a movie. The little kid in 16A peeked over the seat, his hair messy and his eyes big. "Mom, what's the captain gonna do?" he asked again. His mom patted his head, but she didn't know the answer. Nobody did yet. A guy near the front, maybe in 10B, grumbled, "This is taking forever." He sounded annoyed, but he kept looking back at Jamal anyway. Everyone was caught up in this. Jamal didn't move. He just sat there, arms crossed, his backpack tucked under the seat in front of him. His hoodie had a little logo on it, maybe from a sports team or something, but it was hard to see. He didn't look like a troublemaker. He looked like a regular guy, tired, maybe a little bored, but not scared. Why wasn't he scared? Karen had just threatened to kick him off the plane. Most people would be shaking or begging or something. But not Jamal. He was different. He knew something big. What was it? What was hiding behind that calm face? While Karen was gone, the plane got a little quieter, but not for long. People started whispering more. The lady in 15C said, "He's so calm, too calm." Her friend nodded fast. "Yeah, what's his deal?" The smirky guy in 14D chuckled softly, like he was starting to figure something out. The kid in 16A kept asking questions. Mom, is the captain mad? Is he coming? His mom hushed him again, but her eyes stayed on Jamal. Even the grumpy guy in 10B leaned into the aisle a little, trying to see better. The air felt thick like when you know a storm's coming, and you're waiting for the first big thunderclap. Jamal didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He just sat there, waiting, like he had a secret up his sleeve. His phone was back in his pocket now, and his hands rested easy on his lap. He wasn't tapping his foot or looking around nervously. He was still like a statue, but not stiff. Relaxed, but ready. Ready for what? What had he done on his phone? Who had he told Karen to check with? The captain? Someone else? Oh, this was getting juicy. Let's zoom out a bit. The plane was almost ready to go. The doors were closed click and the ground crew outside was waving those bright orange sticks, telling the plane where to roll. The engines hummed louder now, vroom, 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 shaking the seats a tiny bit. Everyone was supposed to be sitting, buckled up, trays up, all that stuff. But this little drama with Jamal and Karen was holding everything up. People didn't mind, though they were too curious. The flight attendants up front, other ones, not Karen, were peeking back, whispering to each other. Something was brewing, and they could feel it too. Back to Jamal. He didn't look at anyone else. He didn't care about the whispers or the stares. He just leaned back in 14B, his seat, and waited. His hoodie made him look cozy, but there was something strong about him too, like a lion that's resting but could jump up any second. Karen thought she had him in trouble, but Jamal wasn't acting like a guy in trouble. He was acting like a guy who knew he was right. And maybe, just maybe, he knew something else too. Something that would make Karen's jaw drop. What was it? Why was he so chill? The kid in 16A couldn't sit still. Mom, he's not scared, he said, a little louder this time. His mom nodded, her eyes big. I know, honey, she whispered back. The lady in 15C muttered, he's got guts. Her friend agreed, yeah, he's not backing down. The smirky guy in 14D tilted his head, like he was starting to respect Jamal a little. The grumpy guy in 10B huffed, just sit already, but even he kept watching. The whole plane was buzzing, not loud buzzing, but quiet, excited buzzing like bees getting ready to swarm. Jamal's calmness was the big clue here. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't even looking mad. He just sat there, arms crossed, waiting for Karen to come back with her big captain threat. What did he know? Why wasn't he worried? Had he done something on his phone, sent a message, maybe? Called someone? Or was it something else? Something bigger? Oh, you're going to love this, it's building up to something awesome. Karen was still up front, at least, that's where she'd gone. She was probably talking to the captain right now, waving her arms and telling him all about this troublemaker in 14B. She thought she was winning. She thought Jamal was toast. Her smirk said it all. She was so sure she'd come back with the captain and Jamal would have to slink away, embarrassed. But Jamal wasn't slinking anywhere. He was sitting. Waiting. Ready. Ready for what? What was his secret? Why was he so cool about this? The passengers kept whispering. The lady in 15C said, she's taking forever. Her friend nodded, yeah, what's she doing up there? The kid in 16A bounced a little in his seat. Is the captain big? Is he mad? His mom smiled a tiny bit, we'll see, sweetie. The smirky guy in 14D leaned back, still grinning, like he knew this was going to be good. The grumpy guy in 10B sighed, but his eyes stayed on Jamal. Everyone could feel it, something was coming. Something big. Jamal didn't move an inch. He didn't fidget or fuss. He just sat there, his backpack under the seat, his hoodie all comfy, his face calm. He wasn't sweating, not even a little. Most people would be nervous, right? If someone said, I told the captain about you, you'd probably feel your heart go thump, thump, thump. But not Jamal. His heart was probably going thump, 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 nice and slow, like he was napping. Why? What did he know that Karen didn't? What was hiding behind that quiet, steady look? The plane's engines got louder, vroom, 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 shaking the floor a little. The flight attendants up front were still peeking back, their heads together like they were sharing secrets. The passengers were all eyes on Jamal now. The lady in 15C whispered, "He's too calm, something's up." Her friend nodded fast, "Yeah, he's got a trick." The kid in 16A giggled, "He's cool." His mom hushed him, but she was smiling now too. The smirky guy's grin got wider, like he was starting to figure it out. Even the grumpy guy in 10B stopped grumbling and just watched. Jamal's secret was the key. He wasn't worried because he knew something. What was it? Had he tapped something special on his phone? Did he know the captain? Was there a surprise waiting for Karen? Oh, this was getting so good. The tension was building like when you're on a roller coaster, climbing up, 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 and you know the big drop is coming soon. Jamal was ready for that drop. Karen wasn't. "Hang on tight, this is about to take off." "All right, here we go, this is the big moment you've been waiting for." 7 minutes had passed since Karen first yelled at Jamal. 7 whole minutes of shouting and arguing and tension building up like a big balloon ready to pop. Karen came strutting back down the aisle like a peacock showing off its feathers. Her shoes went click, click, click on the floor, loud and proud. She had a smug grin on her face, a sneaky little smile that said, "I won this fight." She thought she was the boss, the queen of the plane, and she was about to prove it. Her uniform was all crisp and stiff, and her chin was up high, like she was the most important person around. Oh, she was so sure she had Jamal in trouble. But then bam, the captain stepped out behind her. Whoa, this guy was big. He was tall, with broad shoulders, like a superhero in a pilot's hat. His face was serious, no smiles, no jokes, just a no-nonsense look that said, "I'm in charge here." He didn't look happy, not one bit. His eyebrows were scrunched together, and his mouth was a straight line, like he was already tired of this mess. Karen didn't see that, though. She was too busy grinning, thinking she'd brought the big guns to back her up. The passengers all turned to look, eyes wide, mouths open. This was it. The big showdown was here. The captain's voice boomed through the plane, loud and clear, like a teacher calling the class to attention. "What's the problem here?" he asked. His words cut through the air, sharp and strong. Everyone froze. The lady in 15C stopped whispering. The smirky guy in 14D sat up straight. The little kid in 16A peeked over his seat, hugging his teddy bear tight. Karen jumped right in, pointing at Jamal with her finger like it was a sword. "This passenger won't move from a seat that's not his," she said, her voice loud and snappy. She sounded so sure, like she'd caught Jamal doing something awful. Her smug grin got even bigger, she thought she'd won for sure. Jamal was still sitting in 14B, cool as ever. He didn't jump up or yell or look scared. He just sat there, his hoodie all comfy, his hands resting easy on his lap. The captain raised an eyebrow like when your teacher hears something fishy and isn't quite sure about it. He turned to Jamal, his big shadow falling over the seat. "Sir, can I see your ticket?" he asked. His voice wasn't mean, it was calm, but you could tell he meant business. Jamal didn't fuss or fidget. He reached into his pocket nice and slow and pulled out his boarding pass. That little paper was crumpled from being held so tight, but it was still clear. He handed it over to the captain, still chill, like he wasn't worried at all. The captain took the ticket and looked at it. His eyes scanned the paper quick, but careful. Then he looked at Karen. His jaw tightened, like when you bite down hard on a piece of candy. You could see the muscles in his face move, he wasn't happy. He held up the ticket and said, "This says 14B. He's in 14B. What's the issue?" His voice was loud and firm, like a hammer hitting a nail. Boom. Just like that, everything flipped. Karen's smug grin started to slip like ice melting on a hot day. Her eyes got wide, and her mouth opened a little, like she didn't know what to say. The passengers gasped, little puffs of "oh," and "wow," rippled through the plane. The lady in 15C clapped a hand over her mouth. The smirky guy's grin turned into a big, shocked O shape. The kid in 16A whispered, "He's right." Karen stammered, her words tripping over each other like she'd forgotten how to talk. But I thought," she started, her voice shaky now. She wasn't so loud anymore. She wasn't so sure. Her hands waved a little, like she was trying to grab an excuse out of the air. But the captain didn't let her finish. He cut her off, sharp and fast. "You thought wrong," he said. His voice was like a door slamming shut. Bam. No arguing, no waiting, just the truth. Karen's face went from red to white like all the color drained out of it. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her big win? It was gone, poof, just like that. Then Jamal spoke up, and oh boy, this was the best part. He looked at the captain, his voice steady and smooth, like a river flowing easy. Captain, he said, I've been flying with this airline for years. I'm a platinum member. I picked the seat myself. Whoa. The plane exploded with gasps louder this time, like a big wave crashing on the beach. A platinum member? That's a super special thing. It means he flies all the time like a VIP, a very important person. He wasn't just some random guy in a hoodie, he was a big deal. He'd picked 14B on purpose, and he knew it was his. The passengers couldn't believe it. The lady in 15C whispered, "Platinum." The smirky guy laughed, "No way." The kid in 16A bounced in his seat, "He's cool, Mom." Karen's face? Oh, it was a mess now. All the white turned to shock. She looked like she'd been hit with a bucket of cold water. Her mouth hung open, and her eyes darted around, like she was looking for a place to hide. She'd messed with the wrong guy. Jamal wasn't just calm, he was smart. He knew his stuff. He'd been flying with this airline forever, and he had the proof right there. The captain nodded at him, like he respected him. Karen. She didn't know what to do. Her big plan had fallen apart, crash, right in front of everyone. And then came the kicker, the moment that made everything explode. The captain pulled out his radio, a little black box with buttons, and pressed it to his mouth. "We've got a staff issue," he said into it, his voice crackling through the plane. "Send someone up." He wasn't asking, he was telling. Then he turned to Karen, his eyes hard like rocks. "You're done here," he said. "Get off my plane." Boom. Just like that, she was toast. Done. Finished. The words hit like a thunderclap, loud and final. Karen froze, like a statue, her hands shaking a little. The passengers cheered, soft at first, then louder, like a big yay, rippling through the seats. She was out? Let's paint the scene some more. The plane was alive now, buzzing with noise and excitement. The captain stood tall, his hat tilted a little, his uniform all neat and shiny. Jamal sat in 14B, still calm, his hoodie making him look cozy but strong. Karen was stuck in the aisle, her face white as snow, her smug grin gone forever. The lady in 15C clapped her hands, whispering, "Good for him." The smirky guy in 14D laughed out loud, "She's toast." The kid in 16A giggled, "She's leaving." His mom smiled big, nodding. Even the grumpy guy in 10B, who'd been mad about the delay, cracked a tiny smile, like he was glad justice showed up. Karen didn't move right away. She just stood there, like her feet were glued to the floor. Her hands dropped to her sides, and her uniform looked all droopy now, not so proud anymore. The captain didn't wait. He waved his hand toward the front, like he was shooing a fly. "Go," he said, short and sharp. She blinked, like she couldn't believe it. Get off the plane? Her plane? The one she'd been bossing around like a queen? But the captain wasn't joking. His face said it all, no second chances, no arguing. She was done. The passengers were buzzing louder now. The lady in 15C whispered to her friend, "She deserves it." Her friend nodded fast, "Yeah, she was so mean." The smirky guy leaned back, grinning like he'd just won a prize. The kid in 16A bounced again, "She's going away, Mom." His mom laughed softly, "Yep, she sure is." The air felt lighter, like a big cloud had lifted. Jamal didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He'd won quietly, calmly, but totally. His platinum member secret? It was the bomb that blew Karen's whole plan to bits. Karen finally moved. She turned slow, like she didn't want to, and started walking toward the front. Her click, click, click wasn't proud anymore, it was soft, like she was sneaking away. Her head was down, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look at anyone, not the passengers, not the captain, not Jamal. She was out, and she knew it. The captain watched her go, his arms crossed, his face still serious. He didn't feel bad, not one bit. She'd messed up, and now she had to leave. Jamal. He just sat there, cool as ever. His hoodie was wrinkled, but he looked like a winner. He didn't cheer or smile big, he didn't need to. He'd stood his ground, and that was enough. The passengers couldn't stop talking. The lady in 15C said, "He's awesome." The smirky guy nodded, "Total boss." The kid in 16A giggled, "He beat her." The plane was alive with chatter, everyone amazed at how this quiet guy turned everything around. The captain turned to Jamal one more time. "Sorry about that, sir," he said, his voice softer now. He tipped his hat a little like a salute and walked back to the front. The passengers clapped, not super loud, but enough to make it clear, Jamal was the hero here. Karen was gone, and justice had landed right in 14B. Boom, just like that, the big reveal changed everything. Okay, here we are, the big finish where everything gets wrapped up. Karen was standing in the aisle, frozen like a popsicle. Her face was white, her mouth open, and her hands just hanging there like she didn't know what to do. She'd just been told to get off the plane by the captain, no less. Her big moment had crashed and burned, and now she looked like a kid who'd dropped her ice cream on the ground. She didn't move, not yet, just stood there, stuck, like her feet were glued to the floor. The passengers were all watching, eyes big, waiting to see what happened next. Then, out of nowhere, a security guy came marching up the aisle. He was big and tall, wearing a dark uniform with a shiny badge that sparkled under the plane's lights. His boots went thump, thump, thump on the floor, loud and strong, like a drum beat. He stopped right in front of Karen and said, "Let's go, ma'am." His voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't soft either, it was firm, like when your teacher tells you recess is over and you have to come inside. Karen blinked, like she couldn't believe it was real. Go. Leave the plane? Her plane? But she didn't have a choice, not anymore. She turned slow, like she was moving through mud, and grabbed her bag from under a seat up front. It was a little black bag, all lumpy and stuffed full. Her hands shook a tiny bit as she picked it up, like she was nervous or mad, or maybe both. She slung it over her shoulder, and then she started walking, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle down the aisle toward the door. Her head was down, her shoulders all droopy, like a balloon that lost its air. She didn't look at anyone, not the captain, not Jamal, not the passengers staring at her. She just shuffled off, her shoes barely making a sound now. No more click, 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 just quiet little steps, like she was sneaking away. The passengers didn't cheer super loud, no big woohoo, or anything like that. But they clapped soft little claps, like rain tapping on a window. Clap, clap, clap. It wasn't a huge noise, but it was enough to sting. Enough to say, "You messed up, Karen." The lady in 15C, the one with the big purse, clapped with a tiny smile, like she was happy but didn't want to be too loud about it. The smirky guy in 14D clapped too, but he didn't smirk anymore, he just looked surprised. The little kid in 16A clapped his hands fast, giggling, "She's gone, Mom." His mom nodded and clapped too, her eyes bright. Even the grumpy guy in 10B gave one little clap, like he didn't want to admit he cared, but he did. Jamal. He didn't clap or cheer or even smile big. He just sat there in 14B, cool as ever, his hoodie all comfy around him. The captain turned to him one last time before heading back to the front. "Sorry about that, sir," he said, his voice nice and calm now. He tipped his hat a little like a cowboy in a movie saying goodbye and added, "Enjoy your flight." Then he walked off, his big boots making soft thumps as he went. Jamal nodded back, just a little tilt of his head, like saying thanks without words. He didn't need to say much. He'd won, and everyone knew it. The plane started moving, then slow at first, rolling toward the runway. It was called taxiing, when the plane scoots along the ground before it flies. The engines hummed vroom, vroom, and the floor shook a tiny bit, like a gentle wiggle. People settled into their seats, buckling up, getting ready to go. But they couldn't stop sneaking glances at Jamal. He was the star now. The lady in 15C leaned over, her purse still on her lap, and whispered to him, "Good for you." Her voice was soft, like a secret, but her smile was big. Jamal nodded at her too, just a little one, like he was saying thanks again. He didn't make a fuss, he didn't need to. The smirky guy from earlier, the one in 14D, was quiet now. No more sneaky grins or chuckles. He sat back in his seat, his phone in his lap, just staring ahead. He'd been all smirky when Karen was yelling, like it was a funny show. But now, he didn't have anything to say. Jamal had turned the tables, flipped everything around without even raising his voice. He didn't shout or fight or wave his arms. He just stayed calm, showed his ticket, and told the truth. And that was enough, more than enough. Karen was gone off the plane, out of sight. She'd picked the wrong guy to mess with, and now she was paying for it. She'd thought Jamal was just some random guy in a hoodie, someone she could boss around and push to the back. But nope. He was a platinum member, a big deal with the airline, and he knew his rights. She'd yelled and pointed and made a huge fuss, but it didn't work. Jamal stayed steady, and justice showed up like a superhero swooping in to save the day. Let's look around the plane a bit more. The seats were blue and a little worn, like a favorite old shirt. The air smelled like coffee and pretzels, and the little round windows showed the runway sliding by as the plane rolled along. The lady in 15C kept smiling, whispering to her friend, "He's so cool." Her friend nodded, "Yeah, he didn't even get mad." The little kid in 16A was bouncing now, his teddy bear flopping in his lap. "He won, Mom." "He won," he said, all excited. His mom laughed softly, "Yep, he sure did, sweetie." The grumpy guy in 10B didn't grumble anymore, he just sat there, looking out his window, like he was okay with everything now. Jamal didn't need to do anything flashy. He didn't stand up and cheer or take a bow. He just sat in 14B, his backpack tucked under the seat in front of him, his hoodie all cozy. His face was calm, no big smile, no frown, just steady. He'd turned this whole mess around with quiet power, like a ninja who doesn't need to shout to win. The passengers kept sneaking looks at him, like he was a hero in a storybook. And he kind of was. He'd stayed cool, told the truth, and let justice do the rest. The plane picked up speed now, vroom, 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 rolling faster toward the runway. The engines roared, and the seats shook a little more. People stopped clapping and settled in, but they couldn't stop talking about what happened. The lady in 15C whispered, she thought she was so smart. Her friend giggled, "Yeah, but he was smarter." The kid in 16A kept going, "He's the best, Mom. He's like a superhero." His mom nodded, "He kinda is, huh?" Even the smirky guy who wasn't smirking anymore muttered, "That was wild." He sounded impressed, like he'd learned something. Karen. She was history now. She'd shuffled off the plane, her bag dragging behind her, and the door had closed with a big thunk. She'd tried to boss Jamal around, but it backfired big time. She'd picked the wrong fight, messed with the wrong guy, and now she was gone. The security guy had walked her out, and that was that. No more yelling, no more pointing, just quiet. The passengers felt good, like when you finish a game and your team wins. Justice had landed, and it landed hard. Jamal didn't need to say much. He'd nodded at the captain, taken the ladies' good for you, and that was it. He didn't brag or show off. He didn't have to. He'd won by being himself, calm, strong, and right. His hoodie made him look regular, but he wasn't regular at all. He was a platinum member of EIP, and he'd turned Karen's big plan into a big flop. The plane was his now, in a way not loud or bossy, but quiet and peaceful. The flight attendants up front, the ones who weren't Karen, started getting ready to fly. They walked up and down, checking seat belts, smiling at people. One of them, a lady with a ponytail, gave Jamal a little nod too, like she was saying nice job, without words. The passengers kept sneaking glances, but they didn't stare too long. They didn't want to bug him, he'd earned his rest. The engines roared louder, vroom, vroom, and the plane turned onto the runway, ready to take off. The lady in 15C settled back, her purse on the floor now. "He's a good guy," she whispered. Her friend agreed, "Yeah, he didn't let her win." The kid in 16A hugged his teddy bear tight, grinning big. "He's my favorite," he said. His mom laughed, "Mine too." The smirky guy stayed quiet, but his eyes kept darting to Jamal like he was still amazed. The grumpy guy in 10B looked out his window, but he wasn't mad anymore. The whole plane felt different now, lighter, happier, like a big weight was gone. Jamal had done it. He'd turned the tables, flipped everything upside down without even raising his voice. He didn't need to shout or fight or make a scene. He just showed his ticket, told the truth, and stayed cool. Karen had tried to push him around, but she'd picked the wrong guy. She'd thought he was just some random person she could yell at, but nope, he was way more than that. And now she was off the plane, and he was still here, sitting in 14B like he belonged. Because he did. The plane sped up, vroom, 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 and the wheels bounced a little on the runway. Everyone got quiet, ready to fly. But they couldn't stop thinking about Jamal. He was the hero of this trip. No cape, no sword, just a hoodie and a ticket. Karen was gone, justice was served, and the flight could finally go on. What a win. Okay, everyone, we're at the end of this wild ride. Let's sit back and think about what happened, because the story has something big to tell us. Here's the thing, sometimes the person you think you can push around, the one you think is small or weak, turns out to be the one who's really in charge. That's what happened with Jamal. He didn't need to shout or fight or wave his arms like a crazy person. Nope. He just knew who he was, a platinum member, a guy who flies all the time and picks his own seat, and he stood his ground. He stayed calm, like a superhero who doesn't need to show off to win. And that's so cool. Karen. Oh boy, she learned a tough lesson. She thought she could boss Jamal around because of how he looked, maybe because he was in a hoodie, all comfy and casual, not fancy or loud. She judged him fast, like when you look at a book cover and think you know the whole story. But she was wrong, super wrong. Jamal wasn't just some guy she could yell at. He was strong, smart, and right. And judging him by how he looked? That cost her big time. She lost her spot on the plane, had to walk away with her head down, and everyone saw it. Ouch. That's what happens when you think you're better than someone without even checking the facts. Let's think about that for a minute. Jamal didn't need to be loud to be powerful. He didn't need to argue or scream or make a big scene. He just showed his ticket, told the truth, and stayed steady like a tree that doesn't bend in a storm. That's real strength, right there. He knew who he was, and he didn't let Karen's yelling shake him. Not even a little. And when the captain came, when the truth came out, Jamal didn't have to say "I told you so." He didn't need to. Everyone already knew he was right. That's the kind of quiet power that makes you sit up and notice. Karen, though she thought being loud and bossy made her the winner. She pointed and shouted and acted like she owned the plane. But all that noise, it didn't help her. It just made her look silly when the truth came out. She judged Jamal fast, didn't even look at his ticket, and thought she could push him to the back. Big mistake. She learned the hard way that you can't just look at someone and decide they're not important. People surprise you. Jamal sure surprised her. And that's a lesson for all of us. Don't be too quick to judge, because you might end up walking off the plane with your bag and no job. So, what about you? Have you ever had a moment like that, a time when you surprised everyone? Maybe you were quiet, and people thought you couldn't do something big. But then bam, you showed them you could. Maybe it was at school, when you got an awesome grade on a test nobody thought you'd ace. Or maybe it was in a game, when you scored a goal or made a basket and everyone cheered. Or maybe it was just a little moment, like standing up for yourself when someone was being mean. Think about it. Did you ever feel like Jamal, staying cool and proving you're stronger than people thought? I bet you have a story like that. Let me know in the comments, I want to hear it. Tell me about a time you surprised everyone, or maybe a time you saw someone else do it. Did it feel good? Did it make you smile? I bet it did. Stories like Jamal's make us think about how we treat people and how we stand up for ourselves. Because here's the secret, you don't need to be loud or big or fancy to be in control. You just need to know who you are and stick to it, like Jamal did with his ticket and his seat. This story got my heart racing. Did it get yours too? It's so exciting to see the underdog, the person nobody expects, come out on top. Jamal was the underdog here. Karen thought he was just some guy she could yell at, but he turned it all around. He didn't stay down, he stood tall, quiet, and strong, and won the day. If that made you cheer or clap or just feel happy inside, give it a thumbs up. Let me know you liked it. I'd love to see that little thumb pointing up so I know you're with me. And hey, if you loved this story, hit that subscribe button. There's more where this came from, more tales about people who surprise you, who stand up, who win when you least expect it. Because in this world, the underdog doesn't always stay down. Nope. Sometimes they rise up, like Jamal did, and take their spot. And that's a story worth sticking around for every single time. Don't miss out. Subscribe, and let's keep the fun going together. Let's picture it one more time, okay? Jamal sitting in 14B, his hoodie all cozy, his face calm and steady. The captain tipping his hat, saying sorry and enjoy your flight. Karen shuffling off, her bag dragging, her head down. The passengers clapping clap, clap, clap soft but strong, like they were saying good job, without words. The plane rolling down the runway vroom, vroom ready to fly. That's the ending, but it's also a beginning. It's a lesson, be like Jamal. Know who you are. Stand your ground. Don't let anyone push you around just because they think they can. Karen thought she had the power because she was loud and bossy. But real power? It's quiet sometimes. It's in staying calm, telling the truth, and not giving up. Jamal had that power, and it beat Karen's yelling every time. She judged him by his hoodie, by how he looked, and she lost everything because of it. So next time you see anyone, don't decide they're small or weak just because they're quiet or dress simple. They might be a Jamal, ready to surprise you. What do you think? Does this make you want to be strong like Jamal? I hope it does. Maybe next time someone tries to boss you around, you'll think of him sitting there, cool and steady, holding his ticket. You don't need to shout to win. You just need to know you're right and stick with it. That's what Jamal did, and look how it turned out awesome. Karen's gone, he's flying, and everyone's clapping. That's the kind of ending that sticks with you. So, tell me about your moment, big or small, where you stood up or surprised someone. Drop it in the comments, I can't wait to read it. And if this story made your heart beat fast or your smile get big, give it that thumbs up. Let me know you're here, cheering for Jamal with me. And subscribe because there's more stories like this coming, full of underdogs who win, people who surprise, and endings that make you feel good. In this world, the quiet ones, the steady ones, the ones who don't give up, they're the ones who shine. And that's worth sticking around for, every single time. Let's keep it going. Imagine you're on that plane. You see Jamal, calm and cool. You hear the captain kick Karen off. You clap with everyone else. How does it feel? Pretty great, right? That's what this story's about, feeling great when the good guy wins. Not the loud guy, not the bossy guy, but the good guy who knows who he is. Jamal's that guy, and maybe you are too. So share your story, hit that thumbs up, and subscribe for more because the underdogs got more wins coming, and you don't want to miss them.